Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee of the House of Commons. We continue our accountability hearings this morning with water companies. We'll be hearing first of all this morning from South West Water, the Pennon Group, and then later this morning Yorkshire Water. I'm very pleased to have with us this morning Susan Davy, Chief Executive of the Pennon Group and South West Water. So Susan, for the benefit of the official record and for those who are following our proceedings, can I ask you first of all to introduce yourself to the committee?
Of course. Good morning. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. So I'm Susan Davy. I'm Chief Executive of Pennon Group PLC. We're a FTSE 250 listed business, and we have 4 key operating subsidiaries: South West Water, licence holder, Sutton and East Surrey, a business-to-business retailer, Pennon Water Services, and our renewables energy business, Pennon Power.
Okay. Now, South West Water is a water and sewage company. The remainder of your group are water companies. Is that correct? Now, you're not just a chief executive of Pennon Group and South West Water. You have other interests in the wider industry. You're a board member of Water UK. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you're president of the Institute of Water. Is that also correct? So
Correct.
you're not just a leader in South West Water, you have a leadership role within the industry as a whole.
Yes, correct. And my membership of the Institute of Water, it's celebrating its 80-year anniversary this year, and that institute is very much focused on making sure that we've got trained, qualified experts across the sector, and that's really its focus, to make sure we've got education and qualifications that are relevant to our sector. So very pleased and honoured to be president of that this year.
Okay, I'm sure it is an honour indeed. Just looking at the role that you play as controlling mind, if I can put it like that, of South West Water and Pennon Group. Talk me through the culture that you are seeking to create within the group and the company, because you've been there since 2015 as CFO, is that right?
So I actually joined the group in 2007.
Right.
I then had a variety of roles on the South West Water side, and then I took the Pennon CFO role in 2015, and then was CEO from 2020. 2020. Correct.
Right. Okay. So the culture within the group, how do you see the importance of environmental responsibility, transparency, customer engagement, these things?
Yeah, so I think, given the nature of what we do for our communities and for the region, we rely on the natural environment to deliver our services. So how we want to look after that natural environment, we're a huge water recycler in effect, how we want to look after that natural environment and protect it, enhancement, and make sure that it's there for us and for everybody to enjoy is absolutely paramount. I obviously sit around the board table and it is top agenda on the board every time we meet. Second only to health and safety of my 4,000 brilliant colleagues across the group.
Okay, and how important is customer engagement?
So customer engagement, we probably a couple of things to say. So probably as a first in the UK, and certainly a first in our sector, we are FTSE listed business, and we have embarked on a process of making our customers shareholders in the business. So we have now some 80,000 customers who are shareholders. By number, they're 4 times as many as the institutional shareholders that we have, not by value, but by number. And so we engage, and I engage with those customers who are shareholders, but also customers more broadly, every couple of weeks. I meet customers. Last year I must have met around 1,500 customers individually. It's something I really like doing. We go out on the road, we do virtual meetings as well, so we meet customers all the time.
Do you feel you perform well in terms of customer engagement?
I think in terms of, there is a lot for us to do. There is a lot for us to improve. We have made some improvements. There are areas...
Yes or a no? I'm struggling a wee bit here.
So in terms of engagement, we have always got more to do in terms of engagement, and we know when we look at our customer service scores across the group that we have, South West Water customer service scores are probably below average in terms of where they need to be. Bristol Water are top quartile in the sector. Sutton and East Surrey that we've just picked up last year when we acquired them, again, are towards the lower end. So there is more that we need to do in terms of our customer service satisfaction.
As a public-facing company, a commercial interest, how important is transparency to you?
Well, we're a FTSE listed business, so we obviously want to make sure we're as transparent and as open as we can be with all that we do. If I look to some examples, we launched a couple of years ago now for our Devon and Cornwall region, our WaterFit Live website, which was all about giving information about the use of storm weather flows, which is a huge concern, not just across our region, but more nationally. And we launched that website to try and give our customers and our communities information about the assets and how we were performing and what was happening to those assets. As we got all the monitoring in 2022, we wanted to make sure that we could be sharing that. So I think there are areas where we have obviously progressed in terms of being transparent with our information, and we put a lot of things onto our website and into the public domain in terms of what we do.
Okay, look, well, there's some very well documented cases where you've been involved in court action as an accused, effectively as a defendant. But you've also had a number of your customers actually taking you to the small claims court. Is that correct? For the loss of immunity as a consequence of losing access to waterways from sewage pollution. We've been told that actually South West Water has settled these, offering financial settlements in court, but on the basis of them signing a non-disclosure agreement. Is that correct?
In terms of, well, first thing to say, I hear the concerns that my customers.
Okay, can we just maybe break this down? Is it correct that you have settled claims in the small court on the basis of NDAs?
I would have to go and check that piece of information. I apologise, I don't have that here today. I am aware that we have had, so if I think about our customer service teams, when we have people who come through to our departments and they are dissatisfied with the service that we have given, occasionally we will offer them some financial compensation for any loss that they've incurred. So I would have to check this particular
Given though what you've just told us, is that consistent with settling small claims cases on the basis of NDAs?
I would have to check that specific piece. I'm so sorry that I don't have that information here with me today, but I will check with the team. That is not something that we do as a matter of course, is probably what I would say, but I would just have to check that specific piece of information.
If you could perhaps come back to us on that.
Of course.
Looking at some of the other instances involving court action and prosecution, in 2023, you were sentenced on 13 charges and fined £2.1 million for 4 years of environmental offences. Now, just looking at these environmental offences, 6 were for illegal water discharge activities and 7 for contravening environmental permit conditions. You had to pay costs of $280,000 and a 170 victim surcharge. Can we just look at some of the things that were involved here? Their company discharged harmful chemicals from treatment works on more than one occasion, causing significant environmental damage to sites at Kilmington, on the River Axe, and Crediton on the River Creedy. Thousands of fish died, and the axe and the discharge included some protected species. You breached permit rules in Lostwithiel in July 2016 by pumping raw sewage into the River Fowey. Control room alarms showed there was an issue, but the discharge continued for more than 12 hours. Is this all correct? You can stop me if I'm getting anything wrong here.
No.
The alarms also went off at Watergate Bay treatment works in August 2016, but no action was taken and sewage was illegally discharged into the coastal waters for more than 35 hours. E. coli levels were found to be 2,000 times higher than the level at which water quality would be classified as poor. You described these as isolated incidents. At what point do isolated incidents cease to be isolated and become a course of conduct?
Well, I suppose a couple of things to say. We absolutely, and I absolutely regret and do not condone those instances and those pollutions that we had. We do not want to harm the environment. That is not the activities that we undertake every day. That said, we are a business that looks after critical national infrastructure. We have a network that, if you laid it on the water and wastewater side, the circumference of the world would be wrapped around with the network that we have. Mm-hmm. We have hundreds of treatment works and we have thousands of pumping stations, and from time to time
we
things
know that. I mean, are you telling
wrong.
us that you've got more than you can manage?
No, I think I'm just highlighting that from time to time things do go wrong. And the important thing is that we learn from those lessons. So with that particular set of cases and incidents, we obviously were fined and rightly so held to account for that. Judge Matson, who presided over that case, I personally wrote to the judge and we set out an action plan that we put in place to address some of the findings that came from those instances, because we do not want those instances to continue. But they do happen from time to time, but we want to make sure that we learn from those instances and those lessons.
It's time to look at some of those incidents that happen, as you see, from time to time. All sewage companies in 2023 to 24 were expected to have no more than 22.4 pollution incidents per 10,000 kilometres of sewer. Can you tell the committee what South West Water's performance was against that target?
In terms of, I like to look at it in terms of absolute numbers of pollutions, because one pollution
if I told you the information I have is that against that target of 22.4, you had a 111.24 pollution incidents per 10,000 kilometres of sewer. Would that sound familiar to you? That's
correct. We had 194 individual incidents, and then when you normalise it with the kilometrage, that's the number that you get.
So, do you know, just out of interest, you top that league, right, who the second worst company would be and what their performance is?
I'm really focused on our performance, which isn't where it needs to be.
As a matter of interest then, Southern Water also come in at 58.9, so you're almost double the second worst performing company. What are you doing about that?
Yes, so perhaps if I talk about what we've been doing over the last couple of, since my tenure as CEO, there are two priorities that I wanted to make sure we delivered on. The assessment around pollution incidents and impacts to watercourses is part of the story in terms of impact to the environment, and the Environment Agency's EPA measures around about 4% of pollutions, but pollutions happen when customers' homes get impacted by sewage, their gardens, their roads and highways. And so I set ourselves a task of reducing pollutions to customers' homes, and we've got that down by 60% since 2020, to gardens, to roads, and we've got that down by a quarter since 2020. And then in terms of pollutions to watercourses, if I think about the southwest and Devon and Cornwall, around about just over 70% of our asset base is coastal and faces into those watercourses and estuaries. And that's where we have been focusing on making sure we can reduce the number of pollutions that hit a watercourse by working on our network, which is one of the areas you can get a pollution from, by working on our pumping stations and by working on our treatment works. Since 2020, the number of network pollutions have come down by about 40%, but we have work to do on our pumping stations and our treatment works. We were seeing a reducing trend, so from 2020 to 2022, we went from 225 pollutions to a watercourse to 108, so that brought it down and halved it. And the network numbers came down, as I said, by around about 40%. Then we had, not to say the weather is an excuse for it, but we did have 30% more precipitation over the last 2 years and 30% higher groundwater. That has put significant impact on our pumping stations and treatment works that we are now looking at how we obviously mitigate and avoid that. So we are making activities and efforts that will reduce and eliminate those pollutions. I'm pleased with the work we've done for customers' homes. We're now down to 59 homes across the whole of those counties that are at risk of sewer flooding, which is one of the most awful things that can happen to a home, is to get sewer flooding in it.
59?
So 59. Down to 59.
And that's a source of satisfaction?
We want to eliminate them, but we've taken it down by 60%. We've got more to do. We want to eliminate that, but we have got those down.
But down over what period of time?
Since 2020.
Since 2020. From what number to 59?
So it's down by 60%, so just over 130.
So over 5 years, you've had 5 years and these 59 homes are still affected.
So we've got them on the plan to take them out, but we'll be there.
No, but just to be clear,
yes.
After 5 years, these 59 homes are still affected.
But they're at risk.
If you lived in one of these homes, how would you feel?
Which is why we're focused, which is why I was so focused on getting these numbers down. We are the best performer in the sector in this area. We have been for some time because it is such an awful thing to happen to customers and their homes. So we're really focused on making sure that we can deliver on that plan. Okay,
you touched there on precipitation. You have some of the highest storm overflow usage in the country. But the Environment Agency data suggests that only 12% of them are due to increased rainfall. Why are you relying so heavily on storm overflow usage?
The storm overflows is something that we all want to make sure the use of is reduced and eliminated where we can. We've put the monitors in 2022, and so we can see what's happening in our network now. Now, over the last 15 years, we've had a 2% per annum increase in flows coming into our system. Now, only 0.3 of that 2% is due to increased population, increased homes. So we've had a significant rise in flows coming into our system. Now, if I just describe the southwest, for Devon and Cornwall, waste treatment was put in for the first time in the majority of those coastal towns and homes in the 90s and in the 2000s with our programme of Clean Sweep. And prior to that, the sewage from homes and businesses was collected at the bottom of the catchment and then released into the environment without being treated. So there was a real encouragement to get flows into that network, because if you're going to release something like raw sewage into a beach or an estuary, you want to make it as dilute as possible. So we have a significant amount in our network of flow and runoff and diverted water culverts, diverted streams. So we have a real job to do to take those flows out of the system. And we've got a programme that we've put in place. It will take us 15 years. But we have put that programme in place to start to take those flows out of the system and or make sure that we can treat flows.
In the meantime, storm flow management is part of your overall management portfolio, yeah?
Of course it is, yes.
Right,
yeah.
It is?
It is, yeah.
Okay. We'll move on to major incidents in customer satisfaction. Jane?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to just carry on with that a little bit. Obviously, I'm from Cornwall. Cornwall relies really heavily on our beaches, particularly for tourism, for our economy, for health, and yet South West Water has the worst performance amongst sewage companies for pollution incidents last year, hugely worse than other ones. We have surfers getting ill. We have the headquarters of Surfers Against Sewage in Cornwall, of course. People come down on holiday to Cornwall. Porthlooney Beach, for example, is amongst the top 13 dirtiest beaches in the UK. Would you bring your children on holiday to Porthlooney Beach?
So I hear the concerns, I hear the issues, and we have got our programme in place to eliminate pollutions. That's when things go wrong on our system. So make sure we can eliminate those. And then for storm overflows, we've got our 15-year programme to take those flows out of the system so that we can reduce impacts to the environment.
What will the impacts be on places like St Agnes and Porthlooney that aren't part of the initial programme to look at those storm overflows? How long will it take for those places?
So the one thing I would say in terms of bathing water quality, because I use the waters myself, I live in Devon, I holiday in Cornwall, I'm always in the water as well. So I know how important it is to make sure that we keep those beaches as good as they can be and excellent. Now, if you look at bathing water quality, and I go back, 25 years, bathing water quality was around about 28% in terms of beaches that achieve the excellent standard. You map forward now to where we are today, and we've got 98% of our beaches achieving good or excellent and 100% achieving the standard. So there is an improvement.
You can hear the whole of Cornwall almost screaming at me that it's getting worse. Last year, it did get a lot worse than it had been previously. So how come it's getting worse? How come there are these CSOs disposing onto beaches when it hasn't even been raining? What can we do about that quickly?
So we have already started our programme. We started a couple of years ago with our WaterFit programme. So, I've got shareholder support to put money in to invest in beaches. And if you look at the use of storm overflows through the bathing season from 2020 to last year, even though we've had that increased precipitation and flows, those triggers for bathing beaches and the duration of flows for bathing beaches have come down by a quarter. It's not enough. We have got to do better and to eliminate, but it will take time. We've got to take flows out of the system, and where we can't take the flows out of the system easily, we have to build storm storage so that we can store that storm water to then put back around the system and treat it later. So it is going to take time. I think the other thing to note as well...
Could you say a time frame? Somewhere like St Agnes, which isn't on that programme, the initial programme, how long do you think it will be until they are not having sewage disposed of on the beach?
So I know St Agnes and Trevorn's Cove really well. I've been there quite a number of times. I know there's a stream and a culvert that goes right down through that area, right onto the beach, and there are many inputs to that water course. And if you look at the information that we have, not just for that water course, but for others more broadly, we make up 12% of the issue for poor quality water. 88% is from other sources. What we're trying to do is work, and we have been to Trevorn's Cove and talked to the residents there in the community about what else we can do in the catchment to relieve some of the issues that we see. So there's the very famous picture of Trevorn's Cove with what looks like a really brown slick, and that is coming from up in the catchment to do with the land management that's happening there. And that has
always be problems with agriculture and other things, that's true, but of course you need to focus on what you can do about that. So from your point of view to St Agnes, when will you be looking at the CSOs there?
So I will get back to you with where it is on the programme for that one. I know we have done work. There are 2 pumping stations in particular that we need to look at. and one of them is quite tight in terms of putting in more storage for the flows that come in. So what we're looking at is how we can take some of the flows out of the system upstream to alleviate the triggers for those stormwater flows. But I will come back to you with the exact date.
But you can see my point. I mean, it's beaches all across Cornwall, and it's getting worse, not better. And it's really impacting on our economy as well as the health of the people who live in Cornwall. So I had to pass that on today. It's very important that you understand from the people of Cornwall how much it's impacting.
I do understand. I live in Devon. I go to Cornwall all the time. I use the water. I paddleboard badly, but I use the water all the time. I really understand it. I understand how important it is to the region. We have focused on 49 beaches over this last couple of years. We've got all the other beaches to do. We're now up to 153 beaches that we need to focus on. So I understand the concerns. I understand what we need to do. I want to reassure that if you look at the bathing water tests that we do, they are returning excellent conditions. And one of the things that we've done as well is we've got 16 beaches where we are sampling all year round. Because the other issue that we've got a bathing season, which is a bit of an anachronism.
Are you happy to help residents sample? Because a lot of the residents, for example, at Mylor Creek, which is having sewage spills at the moment, they want help to go down and take sampling themselves. Is that something that you'd be prepared to do?
What we're doing at the moment, we're testing 15 different beaches, and we're using tests that are almost, for want of a better term, like a litmus test for bacterial load to see what that's looking like, alongside a much more clinical laboratory test to see if the results come back the same. So if these
I'm sorry to intervene here, but Jane asked you a very direct question about your willingness to assist.
Of course we will. And apologies, what I was trying to articulate badly was that we're testing these rapid bacteriological tests and see if they
offering
work.
That support. I wanted to move very quickly on to supply before I run out of time, because in July there were residents in St Eville without supply for 2 weeks. I had the same in my constituency in the Roseland as well. I think the hospital was even impacted by that, and yet over previous years we've had problems with supply. We've had hose pipe bans. We probably had, I think, the longest hose pipe ban in history in Cornwall. So what are you doing to improve on supply to hit those targets? I think those were caused by burst water mains. What are you doing to prevent that happening in future?
Yes, so as I articulated earlier, we do have a large infrastructure in terms of the network, and from time to time those situations do occur. What's important is how we have resilience in the network to avoid customers being off and interrupted for their supply. Over the last 4 years, we have reduced the interruptions that we have by around 20%. But one interruption is one interruption too many for our customers, and certainly communities get impacted by that. So we are looking at how do we do two things: make sure we've got not just resilience in the system, which we do have to switch sources, and you will probably know very well, we have a Cornwall spy main, as we call it, that goes right down the centre of Cornwall, and then we have a resilience network that sits alongside as well. What we have to make sure is that we've also got more resilience into the network, and in our plans that we've got for the next 5 years, there is investment to make sure that we can have greater resilience so that customers shouldn't be interrupted for long periods of time if something happens. If a burst happens, we get there quickly, we isolate it, and then we can resource for customers to get back on. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is around how do we support customers when we have a situation like that. And we do give financial support, but also practical support around delivering water, delivering a tanker to the hospital that was out of water as well. But we need to do better at that, and we need to think about the impact it has.
More quickly. It took a while to do that. I just had one more question about customer satisfaction, because South West Water is very low on customer satisfaction levels, having been 12 out of 13, I think, for the last 3 years. And Bristol is better. So my question is, what are you doing about those low rates? How do you intend to improve them? Will you be learning from Bristol and improving, or will Bristol be getting worse?
Yeah, so well, I'm really pleased to say we bought Bristol in 2021, and Bristol remains a top performer and is in the top quartile for all companies. Now, the good thing about having the acquisitions that we've got in the group is that we can learn. So one of the things we are doing, we've got making sure that we've got all our systems on the same basis. So when customers can ring through, and the teams that are doing that, we've got a consistent basis for them to quickly be able to respond and understand what's happening. So we're getting everybody on the same system, which will be really helpful. We are learning some of the initiatives across the rest of the group from Bristol. So they've got a really great one called In Your Shoes, which is all about what's it like to be in a customer's shoes when something goes wrong.
Do you feel that it's getting better now, or are you still waiting for that improvement to come?
It will take us some time, I think, to make sure that where we have incidents and issues in Devon and Cornwall, that we are responding in a way that customers feel confident with our approach to that particular incident, but that things won't go wrong again. So we have more to do.
For example, the incident I was talking about in Myla, they contacted me in the end because they had sent many questions and they hadn't been able to get any response at all. So it still obviously isn't where it should be.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
We maybe keep answers a bit shorter.
Of course, sorry, Chair.
We have a lot to go over. Thank you, Jane. Anna, you were going to raise some questions in relation to the cryptosporidium outbreak.
No.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Jane. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Susan, we've heard a lot about your failures, your company's failures today. Sewage, flooding. We're going to come on to talk about an incident that landed your customers in hospital. It was so serious. But apart from your last answer where you said you were sorry to hear something, I haven't heard you say sorry to your customers for your company's failings. I haven't heard you say sorry to Jane's constituents that were left without water and having their beaches dumped with sewage. Will you say sorry to your customers?
Of course, I say sorry all the time when we have incidents. I should say it more today, and I am sorry. I am always sorry where something happens either to our customers and it impacts them, or to the environment. I'm reserved apology, of course.
You've talked about how you're committed to transparency as a company. I've heard that when you have had major incidents ongoing, the local BBC and ITV have asked for interviews with you, and you as chief executive have refused to be interviewed by the media during the cryptosporidium incident. Is that correct?
So for the cryptosporidium incident, first of all, can I just say...
We'll come on to the incident shortly and the details of that. But is it correct that you have turned down media interviews at times of extreme panic among your customers?
What I wanted to do in that incident was make sure I was supporting my colleagues and communities on the ground for what was happening, and making sure that they were getting all the information they needed from my...
You weren't able to speak
director.
to the media?
I was wanting to speak to my customers who were on the ground.
Wouldn't the media be a good way of doing that?
So what I wanted to make sure that we did was get all our information out to our customers and make sure they were very clear with what was happening in that instance. I had my incident director and my customer services director who were doing that twice daily to make sure that that information was
How
very
were they
clear.
doing that? Were they speaking to the media?
They were, yes.
So you had your team speak to the media, but you as chief executive would not front that media in a time of severe crisis for your customers.
So I spent my time on the ground in Brixham and Kinsale and with the control room back at base, and making sure that our teams were supported in doing what they were doing every day.
Have you faced the media since the incident, the local regional media?
I have, as I said, I've just focused on making sure through that incident that we could get the situation
If you have
resolved
future
for those
incidents of this
customers.
nature, will you commit to speaking to the local media during the incidents to give reassurance to customers who are scared about how they drink water?
The best reassurances I thought I could give customers at that point was to make sure that they were getting all the information they needed from our incident director and from the customer services director.
I'm getting a little bit concerned here that you're being asked fairly straight and direct questions, but the answers are anything but. Helena's question was one that really could have given you a yes or a no.
So I think
Are you prepared to make that commitment? If you're not, then fine, just say so and we'll move on.
I think it depends on incident to incident. There are things that I regret around the Brixham incident, and I should have, in retrospect, perhaps it would have helped if I had spoken to the media, but at the time I thought it was the right thing to do to make sure that everybody had the information that they needed.
Sorry, Helena.
Okay. Moving on to the cryptosporidium incident. So, a very serious incident last summer. Up to 1,000 people in Devon made sick by your company poisoning the water supply. Failures of communication, we've heard from local MPs, they were severely lacking. We've heard that you refused to face the local media at the time to give people that reassurance. Your company also severely failed to step in when you detected the cryptosporidium in the water supply. You didn't issue the boil notice until 24 hours after discovering the parasite. How do you explain that to customers?
Well, the first thing I do need to say is I absolutely understand how devastating it was for that community and for the customers who were poorly. It was a really horrible time for them. And
more people got sick because your company took too long.
Well,
Would you accept that?
Perhaps if I can explain what happened, if that would be helpful. So, cryptosporidium occurs in the natural environment. It is always there. And as other water companies do, we get notification perhaps 2 to 5 times a year of potential outbreaks of cryptosporidium in our region. And we have our testing that happens at our treatment works. Our treatment works is where all the raw water comes in, we treat it, and it's the final barrier before it gets into the network. Our samples, so we were alerted on the Monday the 13th from UKHSA that there were cryptosporidium cases.
What time?
It would have been late afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So we were and as I said, it's not unusual, so we do get a handful of these every year in terms of notifications, and hitherto they've never been something that has been as a result of our water supply. So what we do is we check our samples, so we are sampling for cryptosporidium in our treatment works all the time. That came back, the treatment works that serves Brixham is Little Hempston, that came back as clear. We then, as the rest of the sector do, into the networks. Once the drinking water's left the treatment works, it goes into the distribution network, into hold service reservoirs, so that it's there for use when you've got peak demand through the day. And we check for other pathogens there, E. coli and other nasties, just to make sure that there is nothing happened from final treatment works to service reservoir. And those came back clear as well, so the team checked that on the Monday afternoon. Nevertheless, UKHSA has told us there was an outbreak, and so we stood up the team to go and do some more thorough testing for cryptosporidium after the treatment works, because we knew it wasn't there, into the service reservoir and into the network. Now, to test for cryptosporidium, you need a lot of volume of water, because the cryptosporidium are little oosts, and you need to capture them in filters, so you need lots of water, and the tests take a good period of time before they come back. So we set up the testing rig on the Monday afternoon. We were doing the testing, taking all the volume and tests that we could, and then the results came back on the Wednesday morning that said there was cryptosporidium in our network. So
when did you issue the notice?
That was on the Wednesday morning.
So, I mean, you've just outlined a lot of detail around the testing procedure, but what seems to be the most clear takeaway from that is that your testing procedures failed. Because the HSA told you there was cryptosporidium, you did your own version of testing and thought there wasn't, left it too long, and then issued the boil notice when a lot of people had already consumed the contaminated water. So do you accept you need to change your processes for future to make sure something like that doesn't slip through and make people sick again?
So we've already changed that now in terms of our procedures. So what we will do,
therefore, that your procedures failed in this case, people got sick as a result, and you apologise to those people who ended up sick.
I absolutely apologise to those people who were poorly.
I'm conscious of time because we've got a lot of members that want to come in as well, but we've just talked through a very specific failing and very serious consequences for those customers. You took a decision weeks later to take a £300,000 increase in your pay package following such a failure. How do you explain that?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is my pay and remuneration is not set by me. It is set separately. I didn't take...
Turned it down?
I didn't take my annual bonus.
You didn't take your annual bonus, but you added extra to your pay.
So, because we're a FTSE listed business, we have share schemes that are there. I have to hold a shareholding within the business, within the group, a 200% shareholding. And the share scheme had matured, and that was the amount that it was equivalent to in terms of value. But I have that because I have a shareholding. That shareholding gets built up from those schemes maturing, but also me putting my own money into the business as well. That was the share scheme. It wasn't a cash bonus in that sense.
You thought it was appropriate to take that dividend at a time when people had ended up in hospital after your company's failings?
I thought it was appropriate not to take the annual bonus.
When you were told us earlier that you see your customers as shareholders, the 28 properties that were told that their supply was safe when it wasn't, they got offered £75 compensation. Does that look like is that how you treat your other shareholders?
In terms of, apologies, Chair, which incident was that one?
From the Cryptosporidium incident, there are 28 properties where the water supply was still unsafe and they were told that they could drink it. And then they got a message telling them that the boil order remained in place. And you offered them £75 compensation. Does that feel adequate?
There's probably a couple of things to say for the Cryptosporidium support that we gave customers. In terms of financial support,
we are under serious pressure of time here.
Of course. Yeah.
I've asked you a very direct question. Does your £75 offer of compensation in these circumstances feel adequate now with the benefit of hindsight?
All the customers who are impacted with that boil water notice, where we had found Cryptosporidium in the supply, got the value of their annual bill in terms of compensation, and they got it in different tranches. So every customer had between £485 and £550 as compensation. So I think the amount you're talking about was one element of a compensation we gave those customers.
Just before we move on, Caroline Voden, the local member of Parliament now in South Devon, has asked your company repeatedly to carry out a random testing of the domestic supply in homes in Higher Brixham and Kingswear. This comes to the point about customer engagement and restoring confidence. You've refused to do that. Why is that?
So there are two things about the Cryptosporidium testing. The rigs that we have to set up. So during the event, we had a number of customers where we were testing at their taps. You need significant volumes of water to test for Cryptosporidium at those taps. And you need to permanently leave the tap running for us to collect the samples for that.
We get that, but they're asking you to do it and you're saying you won't. Why is that?
Because practically, it means turning on the taps of those customers constantly.
Is that a difficult thing to do?
Well, in terms of the litres of water you would be using, we need 1,000 litres for a Cryptosporidium test. So it takes literally litres and litres and litres and the permanent taps running. Our experience...
Remind me how much you're losing from outage? Remind me how much you're losing as a company from pipe leaks and outages?
So
1,000 litres doesn't look like much in that context, does it?
For a household who uses on average 145 litres
so
per day.
So you would continue to resist the calls of residents to do that random testing?
So our experience for those customers where we were doing the testing through that Cryptosporidium outbreak is that they got very... in practical terms, it was very difficult for them.
Anna, can you pick up on water security?
Thank you, Chair. And briefly, let's return to a vital question raised earlier by the Chair. Can you confirm, as CEO, did you know about the non-disclosure agreement signed by customers? Yes or no?
As I said earlier, I'll have to find out the specifics of that
I think
particular
that's
case.
quite unacceptable to come before the committee without an answer to a question you would probably have been expecting to answer. Can you at least outline what areas did those NDAs cover?
I can't. I'm so sorry. I will have to come back to the committee with that answer.
Can I just, sorry on it, but I mean, a non-disclosure agreement is a very serious matter. You're either telling us that you've signed this off and forgotten it, or else that actually, this comes back to the culture of the company, you don't need to see these things. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know the specifics of that detail. I will have to come back to the committee on that one. I'm sorry.
Okay, moving on. We've already heard about serious concerns, including incidents in Lostwithiel and across Cornwall and Devon. And the Environment Agency in 2022 said that South West Water showed complacency and were not honest, transparent with regulators about their drought projections and potential risk to the security of supply. So on this important issue on water security, do you agree with that assessment? And how are you improving regional water security 3 years on from that assessment?
In terms of the droughts that happened in 2022, we set off in that year with relatively normal levels of resource across our regions. What happened through that 2022 year is that we had, well, two things happening really. Post the pandemic, we had significant numbers of visitors and people staying in the region, more than we'd ever had before. And if we recall, that was the year where there was still some restrictions around international travel. So we had a lot of visitors and customers in the region, and then we had one of the hottest, driest periods on record for our region that went from March to November. Very dry. Now, our region for Devon and Cornwall, if I focus on Devon and Cornwall, because that was where the acute issues were, Devon and Cornwall relies 90+% for water supply on abstracting from rivers. The reservoirs that we have there are there to back up the rivers, and then don't plug into our treatment works, they're for the rivers. And the rivers were really suffering through that period. So we were releasing water from March onwards to make sure that the health of the rivers was kept. And we were following what technically we call our drought curves to understand.
Do you agree with the Environment Agency's assessment that you're not being transparent with regulators?
I wouldn't have characterised it in that way.
So you don't agree?
I mean, I think it was one of those, it was an unprecedented for us. It became, what we would have assessed as a 1 in 200 year event. It was, we were following normal drought curves, and then we got into the kind of June, July time, and we started raising the
I think this is another example of a concern around transparency. So I've asked you a question about, do you agree with their assessment? I don't feel I'm getting a transparent answer. Similarly to my question around the non-disclosure agreements, as CEO, I think you would have been aware, or you should have been aware, and we're asking you a simple question. So again, on the transparency issue, do you feel you were open, honest and transparent with the regulators?
I would say that we were, but I understand there are different views on what we did. I think what we did through that drought again was unprecedented. We, like I say, 90% we rely on the rivers. We made sure the rivers were. We had all the releases going into the rivers to keep the biodiversity and the health of the river where it was. We served our customers, but we had to put a hosepipe ban in place. We have invested significantly since that situation. We have put in, and in our region, as you will know, we've got disused mines and quarries. We've been repurposing those as kind of mini reservoirs and put those into play. So that we've got, at times of need, for Devon now, we've got a 30% increase in resource available to extract, and for
so on that question about
34%.
Usage, I know the South West has failed to reduce water consumption per capita, and efforts to reduce leakage across the Pennon Group have had mixed results, I think it's fair to say. Is this increasing the risk of future usage bans in the area?
So in terms of our leakage, we have reduced leakage across the group over this 4 years. We have moved, from just shy of 18% down to around 16% of losses. So we are getting better, and there's customer side leaks in that as well. So if you take those out, we're around about 12%. There is more to do in terms of leakage, and we have our bit to play. I think in terms of water resources, we have obviously invested significantly since 2022 to put in these repurposed reservoirs, and we've also put in some transfer schemes as well, which will be helpful. The one area that we have to deliver on, and we haven't yet delivered on, is around desalination. We have a small desalination plant on the Isles of Scilly, but we need to make sure that we've got that in our, let's call it, portfolio of resource going forwards, and that's something that we're still working on.
So do you accept that your reporting methods for leaks and consumer usage figures are inadequate? And if so, what are you doing to improve them?
I think in terms of where we have got to, it makes sense for